must unlearn what you have learned.
Hello there. Come here, my little friend. Don't be afraid.
Away with your weapon! I mean you no harm!
Kill him. Kill him now.
Do it!
You failed me. I am a Jedi, like my father.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Shootin the Sith. I am your host, Robert Slavinsky, and today's episode is going to be a bit of a mix of a few different things. I'm going to cover some news, some topics that have come out over the last couple weeks, but I also have a guest, somebody who I got to speak with who is a diehard Star Wars fan, because I'm loving doing that. A couple weeks ago, over the past couple weeks, I should say, I talked to Mike Peacock from Misery Point Radio. I talked to the people who run Outer Rim Praxium, a lightsaber school in West Virginia. This week, though, I'm going to be talking with Sean Koon, host of Pittsburgh Nerd podcast, and we just talk about his love for Star Wars and everything that has come from that because of his love, how he got into podcasting, why he loves entertainment so much, all that kind of stuff. It's an amazing, amazing talk and discussion. So that will be a little bit later on in the show here. But right now, I kind of want to talk about a few little things here. Some news that popped up over the past couple weeks. Now, I'm going to start with something that's a little bit older. Leslye Headland is going to produce a female-centric series for Star Wars on Disney Plus, or maybe Disney, maybe it's a film. I'm guessing it's Disney Plus. Let's see. Sources say it will be a female-centric series that takes place in a different part of Star Wars timeline than other projects. Headland is said to be attached to write and serve as showrunner on the series, with the show currently staffing. So it sounds more like it's going to be a Disney Plus series. I can't imagine them putting anything Disney on ABC or Disney Channel or Disney XD or what have you. So if you think about it, that's kind of really neat. But what is everyone's thoughts about another female-centric property coming to Star Wars? It started back in 2008. And whether people want to admit it or not, but the Clone Wars, what Dave Filoni created with George Lucas, the Clone Wars, was very female-centric. Granted, yes, we had Anakin and Obi-Wan and the clones, because there was a lot about the clones in there as well, but the character, the main protagonist that pretty much came out of that series was Ahsoka Tano. That show was built on the shoulders of a very powerful female-centric figure. So I can understand why people might start to get sick of this idea of more female-centric shows or properties from Star Wars. Now, keep in mind, that's not all we had. The sequel trilogy, main protagonist, Rey. I mean, that's that right there. That's who it was. It was Rey. Female-centric. You take a look at Rogue One, another female-centric thing. Yes, the supporting characters and even or not side characters, but the co-leads of these things were male in some cases, but overall they were very female-centric. So another one. We are getting another series that's female-centric. Now, step back a second, because I know there's a lot of people out there saying, oh, we've had so much female stuff. The Mandalorian, not female-centric. It has Cara Dune in it, which, Gina Carano is doing a fantastic job in that role. But you have that. Then on the other side, you have the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that's going to be coming out. Again, not female-centric. There will be some female entities probably throughout the show. I wouldn't put it past them or doubt that they would do that, but you have that as well. Rebels. That was, yes, they had Hera, who was a very strong female character, but overall, it was not female-centric. And Resistance, again, strong female characters, but again, even though that was more childish, very male-driven. So, people out there who are complaining, all these female-centric things coming out, I understand what you're saying, but you're wrong. You're wrong. There's no other way to put it. There's definitely been some more, how can I put it? Some more emphasis put on the idea of having female-centric stories coming out, but they haven't left the males behind. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are saying that they've left the males behind, but they haven't. You take a look at something like The Last Jedi, there's a lot of people who sit there and criticize The Last Jedi for being very feminist and very feminist moving. Again, whether you agree with that or not, you have to step back and say, look, at least we've had all these other things as well. My only issue with it is Star Wars was never meant to be politicized in that way. It was never meant to be, oh, you need to have women, you need to have equal amount of women, equal amount of men, equal amount of this, equal amount of that. That wasn't what Star Wars was. But in today's world, in the 21st century, and especially with Disney, that's what we're going to get. We're going to start seeing a lot of that happening, and a lot of the, equal rights ideas come to fruition. Is it right or wrong? It's not my place to say. It is not, because I have enjoyed more than half of what has come out from Star Wars since Disney has taken over Lucasfilm. I loved Rogue One. I loved Solo. Clone Wars, the last season was phenomenal. Rebels was fantastic. Resistance wasn't terrible, but it was very childish. And I get that. I wasn't going in there expecting it to be anything but a childish show. And I like portions of the sequel trilogy. So it's not that I dislike what's come out. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it's wrong for what Disney is doing. But then again, I do see and understand why people are coming and pushing back on these ideas. I just got to say, look, it is what it is, you know? Let's see here. Now, Leslye Headland, I guess she created or worked on Russian Doll, which is a pretty big show. Not big, but it's a strong show on Netflix. I haven't checked it out. I'm probably going to go check it out now because I want to see what kind of writing she does, what kind of show running she does, and everything like that, and see how that is, because that could play into how Star Wars is. But I always tell people, be wary about what you're doing whenever you go and watch something that a showrunner has done. The creative minds in Hollywood, and especially with TV, they can so easily change from one thing to another. You can have somebody who show runs something like, like Russian Doll, but then come to Star Wars and you won't have any aspects of that in their show for Disney Plus or for Star Wars. So, definitely check it out. You can kind of see her style, I'm sure, but let's check out and wait and see what happens with Star Wars. It's just an exciting time. I mean, if you think about it, we're getting more Star Wars now than we ever have. And not only that, but it's going on Disney Plus, and it's fantastic. It is just fantastic that we're getting this stuff on Disney Plus. Speaking of that, The Mandalorian, huge show, absolutely amazing. Who doesn't love the child, aka Baby Yoda? Everybody loves it. What could make that show better? Now, if you remember, there was a big rumor and speculation and theory going around back in season 1, after I want to say it was episode 6, I believe, 5 or 6, where there was a mysterious figure who walked over into the frame, but we just saw his legs, or her legs, in that moment. And that was at the end of the episode. The speculation was, and the thought was, that is Boba Fett, because the footsteps made the similar sound that Boba Fett's footsteps made in the original trilogy. Well, according to Variety, we may be getting that. Temeau, I can never say his name, Morrison, is returning to the Star Wars galaxy. This time playing a different iconic villain. Now, sources, and this is coming from Variety, sources with knowledge of the series confirmed to Variety, having played his father in clone Jango Fett in the prequels, that he will be appearing in Season 2 of The Mandalorian as Boba Fett. Okay. Could be interesting. not saying that it's out of the realm of possibility. We don't know what happened to Boba Fett after Return of the Jedi. Yes. The extended universe, the expanded universe, the what is now called Legends canon has shown that he survived, climbed out, yada, yada, yada. But in canon, currently, at this point in time, since Lucasfilm changed everything in 2014, Boba Fett is still a mystery. We don't know. Did he survive? Did he escape? Did he die? Remember, it was only about 5 years ago, that Josh Trank was to direct a Boba Fett film. But he backed out. After everything that happened with him on Fantastic Four, he decided that he couldn't and wouldn't be able to do it justice. His mind wasn't in the right place. He left. He walked away. That Boba Fett film just kind of hung around for a little while. You know, the script and everything like that just kind of hung around. And I don't know if there was a script. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe there was just a story idea. Maybe they didn't even get to writing it yet. But that idea hung around. And comes Jon Favreau, and he's like, yo, I want to make a show. And they make The Mandalorian, which a lot of people speculate and believe that, okay, this could have something to do with that Boba Fett film that was supposed to come out. And maybe it does. Maybe some of the story elements and story ideas came over into The Mandalorian. So Boba Fett showing up in The Mandalorian in Season 2 isn't kind of out of the realm of possibility. I mean, why not? Why not throw him in in Season 2? There's already rumor that Ahsoka Tano is going to show up, which, you know, could be played by Rosario Dawson. Again, it hasn't been 100% confirmed or denied by Lucasfilm or Disney that is going to happen. Rosario Dawson hasn't spoken about it. Ashley Eckstein talked about it a little bit. The voice of Ahsoka, she said, you know, that it would be excellent. She is, you know, she appreciates all the love that people want her to play the part, but she doesn't hate the idea of Rosario Dawson jumping in and playing the role. So you got to really think about it. Like, if Boba Fett shows up, they're just adding to the lore. They're expanding the story. And there's so many people out there that it's kind of split. You know, people want the old stuff into the new era of Star Wars. They want those old characters brought in. But then you have the side of people who are like, no, we want new stories. We want new characters. We want new things. I understand that. The Mandalorian himself, he is a new character. You got it there. The child, Cara Dune, all the characters in The Mandalorian, that first season is all new characters. We don't have any established old characters in that first season. So coming into the second season and maybe, you know, sprinkling some of these legacy characters. Ahsoka Tano is a legacy character at this point. I mean, she has been around now for the better part of 15 years. You sprinkle her in. Boba Fett, who has been a fan favorite for many, many years, you sprinkle him in a little bit, connecting him to the Mandalorian lore. Again, there's the debate. Is Boba Fett a Mandalorian? Is he not? Well, as of now, I say no. Why? Because we've heard Lucas talk. We've heard Dave Filoni talk. We've heard these people talk about how they actually aren't Mandalorians. Jango Fett nor Boba Fett were Mandalorians. But when you get down to it, and you see what they did in the first season of Mandalorian, you realize that it is not a race. You know, it's not something that you are born into, essentially, but it is kind of like a, what did they say? Man, I'm losing my mind here. You guys are probably all screaming, it's this. Anyways, you know what I'm saying? It's a way of life. It's not something that is who you are. It's, you know, yes, there is a Mandalore. There is a planet, but that's not what makes you Mandalorian. And that's kind of the basis behind Boba Fett. Maybe at some point in his life, he became part of that way of life. And he is technically a Mandalorian. We won't know. And that's what's kind of exciting about this possibility of Boba Fett showing up in the show. But here's an interesting thing. Why cast Temeau Morrison? Temeau. I think that's how you say it. Temeau. I think is how you say it. Why cast him? Because Boba Fett is just a guy in a mask, right? essentially, we know that the first season of The Mandalorian, almost half of the season was filmed without Pablo Pascal even being cast as the Mandalorian. It wasn't until halfway through the season they were like, "Hey, we got our Mandalorian finally." Why? Because it was just, they had a stunt double, they had somebody in the suit walking around doing things. He was just the voice. There's other people that they could get to voice Boba Fett. You take a look at the guy, and I don't have him on the top of my head here. Let me see. We'll do some research here right as I'm on here. Look at that. Who voiced Rex on the Clone Wars? You think I would know this stuff, huh? D. Bradley Baker. D. Bradley Baker could have come in and voiced Boba Fett. There's a reason why they cast Morrison. There's a reason. They are going to use his face. They're going to show his face in some form or fashion on that show. Now, a lot of people are speculating that not only are we going to get Boba Fett, but we may also get Captain Rex. Now, you do realize that he would be very, very old come this time, in lore. Depending on who you talk to, there's some retconning that went on when it comes to the Return of the Jedi, where Rex was actually at the Battle of Endor. If that's true, and if we want to stay with that, that's about the age he would be. That's about, he wouldn't be incapacitated, but he's not going to be as agile and nimble as he once was when he was a younger clone during the Clone Wars. It also can make sense that Rex shows up because Ahsoka is possibly going to be in season 2 of The Mandalorian. If that is the case, it works. It makes sense. I'm fine with it because those two work so well together. There was such a great bond and relationship between the two of them that I would love to see where they're at this point in time. We saw them in Rebels. Rex showed up in Rebels, which was prior to A New Hope, and we saw their relationship was still strong at that point in time. Again, maybe not. We're going to see. It's going to be interesting to see what they do and what happens with those characters. So, with all that said, let me know what you think of everything. Let me know what your thoughts are on all of this. Leslye Headland, creating a new Disney Plus Star Wars series, female-centric. Let me know what you think about Temeau Morrison coming back as possibly Boba Fett or even Captain Rex, or it could be any other clone that's out there. It could be something that we didn't expect at all. Maybe some other clones escaped and they became Mandalorians. We will find out, I'm sure, in the very, very near future. Well, if not in the near future, definitely by November of later this year and forward as the new season starts then. One other thing. Have you guys watched that Mandalorian documentary so far? 2 episodes out. It's been fantastic. But episode 2, Dave Filoni just blew everything out of the water. He just was like, look, people don't seem to understand episode 1. And he didn't, this is me just saying this. This isn't what he said, but he essentially is like, look, people don't understand episode 1 and its connection to the overall arc of Star Wars. And he explains it so freaking well. And I love it. I love it. And I encourage people to go find it and listen to it and watch it. It's on Disney Plus. There are clips of it now you can find all over the internet now. People have, taken it and thrown it on Facebook and everything like that. If you're somebody who disliked episode 1, The Phantom Menace, watch that. It's going to make you appreciate it more than you ever have. I'm not going to sit here and say that you're going to love it, but you're definitely going to appreciate The Phantom Menace more than you ever have. It was a very, very intriguing and interesting talk. He talked for 7 minutes about it. The very end of the episode, it's 7.5 minutes long, essentially, or 7 minutes long, something like that. He just dives in. He's like, look, here's what The Phantom Menace is. This is why I don't understand why people don't understand it or get it, because the connection to this, to then Return of the Jedi, is absolutely incredible. So please check that out. All right, with that said, I'm going to jump in now. You're going to hear me and Sean from the Pittsburgh Nerd just talk Star Wars. And that's what I love doing. I love talking Star Wars with people that I don't normally talk Star Wars with. So I hope you all enjoy it, and I'll talk to you on the other side. And I am here with Sean Koon from Pittsburgh Nerd Podcast. How's it going, Sean?
Good. How are you? Good to be on the show.
It's been a while. I've been trying for a number of years now, basically, to get you on one of my podcasts, whether it's Bridging the Geekdoms or Shootin the Sith, and I've always appreciated all the help that you've given me. I mean, there was a lot of times where I would reach out to you for suggestions and ideas and things like that. I've been listening to your podcast for probably 2 years or so now myself, and it's just nice to finally be able to sit and talk with you.
It is nice. I mean, we've been doing it. It'll be 7 years this June. So, I weirdly have a ton of experience at this now for some ungodly reason. So I'm always happy to help out where I can.
Yeah, I sit back and I think about the last 3 or 4 years for me, and just the various podcasts that I jumped into, tried to go with and experiment with and everything like that. And it's just a crazy ride when you start getting into this hobby or field or whatever you want to call this. It's just a crazy roller coaster ride where, you have your highs, you have your lows, and sometimes you're like, why am I doing this? I don't know, but it's fun. And that's kind of the way that I look at it. So I don't know how it is with you.
Well, I'm the same way. I mean, it's a hobby. It's something, under normal circumstances, it's a great way for me and Ian, who's my cousin, my co-host, to get together once a week and just hang out and talk and have fun. So at this point, I don't look at numbers and be like, gotta bump them up, gotta pump them numbers up. It's more for us. It's more about just getting together, having fun, and talking about the things we talk about anyway. So now there's a microphone between us. That's the only thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, the whole idea for bringing you on to Shootin the Sith here, I'm trying to do a little series of sorts where talking to fans and creators of within the fandom in some sort of fashion. I know you talk a lot about Star Wars on your podcast, Pittsburgh Nerd, from time to time, and I wanted to reach out. I wanted you to come on the show and discuss Star Wars with me a little bit. But before we get into that, I want everybody to know who you are. I don't want people, I'm sure there's some listeners here who have never listened to Pittsburgh Nerd Podcast. So tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from and how you got into podcasting.
Well, my name is Sean, and I'm the co-host of the Pittsburgh Nerd Podcast. When I was younger, my dream was to be in radio. That was the whole deal. I wanted to be Howard Stern, like everybody does. And then you find out later in life, they're not going to let you be Howard Stern. They're not going to let you talk about the things you want to talk about. You have to do country and Sheboygan or something. So I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to talk about the things I loved. And so I kind of gave up on that. And then years later, the guy who's an influence on all of us, Kevin Smith, started doing his podcast. And Kevin Smith's whole thing is always just do it. Just get out there and do it. Be a filmmaker, be a creator, be creative, do whatever it is you do. And it was I'm never going to be a filmmaker because that's not my passion, but this podcasting thing, it seems like something I could do. It seems like it's something that would be fun to do. And so I started doing the research and how to do it. And, the idea came to my head, I wanted to do something that was similar to Smodcast, where it's just a conversation between me and, in this case, my cousin, who is, we grew up together. We're almost like brothers. And I was like, this is a great idea for us just to get together, have fun, talk about the things we talk about, record it, and see what happens once it goes out into the ether. And that's, I'm 47. I'm an old man, and this is just what we do. It's the fun thing that we enjoy.
That's it's funny. Everybody I talk to who's in podcasting, they almost have the same story. It's really interesting because there's so many people who either want to get into radio or have been inspired by somebody else in podcasting. And a lot of the time it is Kevin Smith. I was inspired by Kevin Smith. You were, as well as a lot of people over on our network, Spoilerverse. We've all been influenced by somebody in the podcast world. So it's interesting to see that, especially when it comes to other shows that are outside of my network. It's really interesting to see.
Yeah.
Now, talk a little bit about Pittsburgh Nerd. I mean, you talk about how you started it, but what has been your whole plan and idea when it comes to your podcast?
At its soul, all the show is a conversation between me and Ian. Many times, like, I'll do research, like, okay, you have to have topics ready, and we'll never get to the topics because whatever it is that we end up talking about with each other is far more interesting and takes up the time for the show. So at its soul, that's all it really is just a conversation between me and Ian about the things that we would talk about anyway. I do research topics to discuss. They're usually nerd based. Sometimes they're not nerd based. It's just the things that strike me as I think this would be an interesting conversation for us to have. I mean, sometimes it's chili cheese dogs. Sometimes it's people who have sex with horses. Sometimes, it's whatever, but this is the stuff that we end up finding, or I end up finding, and we end up talking about and trying to make conversation and make it entertaining for other people to listen to. Yeah.
Now, I know the name Pittsburgh Nerd. I don't want that to turn people off and think that, it's just for, people that live in Pittsburgh. And while I do appreciate it and love everything that you do, because you talk a lot about Pittsburgh history, not just history, but like what's going on in Pittsburgh. I appreciate that, being a Pittsburgh native myself. But it is a lot more than just that. Like you were saying, you guys just basically just shoot the shit. Like you just sit around and just talk, and it's entertaining. It's fun. I really appreciate what you guys do and having that entertainment out there, because like I said, it's one of my go-to podcasts over the last few years. And I'm happy I stumbled upon you guys for sure.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's the thing I always love are shows where people get personal about themselves. It's like one of those things where it's like, I'm going to let you in a little bit into what my life is really like. And that's what we are like. So yeah, we do talk about Pittsburgh a bit because that's just where we're from. That's so like, if I talk about like the death of the Dirty O this week, that's something that's important to me, because when I was in my 20s and getting drunk all the time and drinking in Oakland, I'd go to the O for some dog and fries, So I mean, those are the types of things that, you just end up talking about because they're a part of your life. And so those are the things I appreciate about it. I mean, we could be just let's talk about nerd news, and that's interesting enough, but I feel like, there's 1,001 of those as well. So how can we be different? Well, we can be different by talking about ourselves as well and how things affect us.
Exactly. That's one of the hardest things, is finding that little something, that little, spice for your own podcast that is going to draw people in. What is different? Why am I going to come listen to you as opposed to going in? I mean, Kevin Smith, we were just speaking about him. He has a news show called Hollywood Babylon. That's what they do. They talk about the nerd news in that show, as well as other things. But why would somebody go, okay, well, instead of listening to somebody like him, let's go over here. You have to find that little bit of spice that really differentiates your show from everything else. And I think you've done that. I mean, the Pittsburgh aspect I really enjoy. And I try to promote. I tell people, hey, what's a podcast that you listen to that you really like? I will tell them Pittsburgh Nerd, because it is one of those shows I just enjoy sitting down and listening to. Now,
I really appreciate that. Thank you. I'm glad we strike that chord with you, and I hope other people do as well.
Oh, definitely. I think you do. I mean, I'm pretty sure you have a decent following. I don't know your numbers, but I'm sure you have a decent following. I mean, for doing it for 7 years, again, it's not about the numbers, though. We talked about it a little bit ago. It's not about the numbers. It's about just enjoying yourself. And for me, I'm the same way. It's an outlet. I love sitting down talking Star Wars. I love sitting down with Colton on Bridging the Geekdoms and talking about anything that's going on in the nerd world, plus more. It's just a good time. It's just, and whether people listen to me or not, it is what it is, but I hope people do, but it's something that I enjoy doing. And it's something that in 10, 15 years after I'm done doing it, I could sit back and say, hey, that was a good time in my life. That was a fun time. Or even my kids, when they're older, they can always go back and hear my voice. If I ever die, they can go back and listen to me, which is kind of neat. So that's exciting. I just love hearing people's stories when it comes to podcasting. I really do. I just love their whole idea and aspect and how they got into it. Now, getting into the meat of this episode, give us a little bit on your history with Star Wars. I mean, you told us you're 47 years old, so you were prime age when it first came out. Were you a big part of that in the late 70s, early 80s, or was it something that you fell into later on?
No, it was. I saw the original Star Wars when I was 5.
Okay.
So it was like one of those things. Like, what people don't remember is, like, back then, movies, if it was a successful movie, would play in theaters for like a year. It's not like today where if it's in theaters for 3 months, it's a successful run. It was like Star Wars was in theater for over a year. So, like, my dad, he would take me. I grew up in Port View, which is just outside of McKeesport. So we would take a bus into McKeesport for my dad to go give me a haircut. And if I was good, my reward was we would go see Star Wars. Because there was a couple of theaters in downtown McKeesport that, it may have been a bit shady, but they were playing Star Wars.
Yeah.
So that was my reward. I went to the barber. I got my hair cut. If I was good, I got to see Star Wars. And so that was 77, 78. And then you flash forward to 1980 when Empire comes out, and I'm a bit older now. I'm a 7-8-year-old, and Empire shapes the person that I've become, which is a weird thing to say. But in my lifetime, I had never seen a movie where the good guys lost. And so you watch Empire as a young kid, and at the end of that, Luke's had his hand cut off. Vader says he's his dad. Han's frozen in carbonite. At best, you call this a draw. And it freaked me out as a kid. My dad had to pull me from the theater as I was yelling and screaming, "It can't end like this. It can't end like this." And it made me the jaded jagoff that I am today.
Sorry, that's humorous.
But it's kind of true. Like, I look back at that and I think to myself, that's the beginning of, like, the end of my innocence in many ways. Like, George Lucas made me realize that the world isn't fair.
Mm.
In a weird way, as a 7-8-year-old, I was that really struck a big chord with me. And then, 83, my grandfather takes me to go see Return of the Jedi, and I was like, man, I can't believe that's the end of this. And so, like, as a young person, this was what molded me. Like, Star Wars became home. It opened my doors for me to watch other science fiction. My dad sat me down and he's like, "You need to watch this movie because it has Harrison Ford in it." Harrison Ford was Han Solo. Well, that was Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Blade Runner became my all-time favorite movie. Then Indiana Jones, the Indiana Jones movies, Raiders of the Lost Ark, all that stuff. Like, it was like, well, it's got Han Solo in it. You'll like it. I'm like, oh, okay, sure. Yeah. Oh, shit. That's really good.
Yeah.
So, like, but Star Wars became home base and opened my eyes to other forms of science fiction and fantasy and everything else. That was what became the opened those floodgates for me, though, as a kid. And you find out the things that influenced George Lucas. So I ended up watching, like, Akira Kurosawa movies because they were a major influence on George Lucas in creating Star Wars. And when my dad told me that, I'm like, oh, okay, let's watch Seven Samurai. So it's amazing how, like, if you allow something that's been an influence on you to open up doors to other things that were influenced by it, the things that you find. And that's what Star Wars did for me at the beginning, and then you had the dark years, the late 80s into the 90s. And then where it became like secret code, like, amongst, like, people my age, or, like, if you threw a Star Wars quote out there and somebody got it, it was like, okay, you're one of us. You've watched the trilogy how many times? And you get to the point where, like, they finally started writing the books again. The Thrawn trilogy comes out, and that was amazing. And I was somebody who read anyway. Like, I was reading The Lord of the Rings. I was reading all this other stuff, So it's like, but Star Wars books, like, finally something to feed the beast, and, like, you started with the Thrawn trilogy, and that's, like, this amazing. I still think they need to find a way to fit that back into canon somehow, and it goes on from there. I stood in line to see the special editions because it was at least feeding the beast. Star Wars is back in theaters. Then you go see it the way it was meant to be seen on a big screen as an adult. And, then you come to the prequels, and that was the first time I questioned George. Like, I watched The Phantom Menace, and I was like, walked out of the theater. It was one of those movies where I was like, I think I liked it. I'm not sure. But I tried to convince myself, it's better than you thought, man. That fight at the end was really good, and pod racing, yippee. I don't know, but you were there for it, and I still like, even though it's like my least favorite Star Wars film, I at least appreciate The Phantom Menace, and the Clone Wars is better than I think people give credit for, and Revenge of the Sith is its own thing, and then you're given the Clone Wars cartoon, you're given Rebels. I mean, the revival of Star Wars at this point has been like a godsend to me, because it's like, I'm going back home, and I get to enjoy these things even more now that they're hip and trendy.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on all that. I'm a bit younger than you are, and I didn't get into Star Wars until the mid-'90s with the re-releases on THX, THX remastered versions. And that's when I got into it. But I was the perfect age for prequels. And I remember when episode 1 came out, I remember when it finally came out on VHS, I just watched, I think, over and over and over again. And it wasn't because I loved it so much. I did. I really enjoyed it. But I was really trying to make myself like it more than I actually did. I got to watch, because there's got to be something I'm not seeing that needs to be appreciated a lot more. And as time went on, I agree. Like, I eventually read the Thrawn series, trilogy, the what is it called? It's called something else. I can't remember right now. But yeah, I read those books, and they were fantastic. And I think we might see a version of that come back into canon. I do. I mean, I'm sure you've watched Rebels and everything like that, and the way that season or that series ended, Thrawn is still out there come Return of the Jedi, essentially.
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting to see if he does come back and they do something with that. I'm really hoping that potential sequel series that's coming out for Rebels is going to be that. Like, that's kind of what I hope they do. Something that's to it.
That's something I always said. Like, when they said they were flat, they were going 30. When they announced, like, we're going to do some more Star Wars movies. The next one's going to take place 30 years after Jedi. I'm like, I get you can't do it as a live action, but man, you got to find a way to animate that trilogy, because it's so good.
Yeah, they really should have found a way to incorporate that into their plans, because if you really think about it, everything that they did with the current or the sequel trilogy, it doesn't really negate much of that Thrawn trilogy. There's some things here and there, obviously, but for the most part, overall, I mean, they could have made adjustments and made that fit into the canon, but Lucasfilm really wanted to have a clean slate. I get that. And I mean, with that, what is your opinion on what has been going on since Disney took over Lucasfilm and Star Wars? There's a lot of divisive views on what has gone on with the sequel trilogy and everything like that. For you, what do you think? Somebody who's been a fan since the 70s and 80s.
I think the thing is very apparent with the sequel trilogy is they didn't have anybody guiding that ship. Like, you watch The Force Awakens, and it's a great movie. Yes, it harkens back a bit to the feel of the original trilogy, and there are certain things you can say, well, they just took that straight from whatever. It re-engages you and makes you remember what Star Wars actually felt like. I mean, if there was one thing you can complain about the prequels, is it really didn't feel like the original trilogy. The prequels had this different feel about it. I don't know if it's because everything looks so shiny and new as compared to the original trilogy, but it was just one of those things where, like, you looked at that and you're like, man, it doesn't look like Star Wars as compared to others.
I think that was done on purpose, and I even think there was an interview with George Lucas who said that's done on purpose.
I get that, but like, it's still like there was the way Star Wars looked was such a huge influence, an influence to the point that Ridley Scott changed everything about the Alien movie to look like a more used universe like George Lucas had. You know, so like that influence was huge. And when you get to the prequels where like I get it, like I get George's point on that, it still didn't look like a Star Wars movie. Like it was just too shiny and new. But you get the Force Awakens, and it harkens back to that used universe kind of feel. Not everything felt grungy and dirty, but it had a grungy and dirty feel to it. And that movie works. It works very well for me. But then you get to the Last Jedi, and I love that movie. Like, I am not somebody who dislikes that movie at all. I love that movie. But it feels like a square peg in a round hole, because it doesn't take what J.J. Abrams did and move forward with it. You know, it's like that whole, and I liked what he did with it, but it didn't fit with the feel of The Force Awakens. And then you get the Last Skywalker, the Rise of Skywalker, and it's trying to build off of what you really did in The Force Awakens, and it's like this jump where like we're going to try to undo what we did in The Last Jedi, because The Last Jedi kind of undid what we did in The Force Awakens and try to redo what we did in The Force Awakens. And you could just tell there was nobody manning the wheel to give a cohesive story to that prequel trilogy. And as much as I enjoy all three movies, the third one, I've got more problems with than the other two. You could just tell it just doesn't feel like a cohesive story.
That seems to be the consensus with everybody, is just the lack of direction it seemed like that trilogy took. And for me, I mean, I'm with you. I really enjoyed The Force Awakens. It was one of those movies that I had a blast with. And the excitement even building up to it was probably even more fun than the movie itself, but it was an exciting time for Star Wars. You know, it's Episode 7 coming back after 10 years. I mean, we didn't think 10 years prior, we thought, hey, that was it. And we got another movie, which was exciting. And for me, the most exciting part of that was taking my kids to the theaters to see Star Wars, seeing their eyes wide as the crawl rolled up the screen and stuff like that. To me, that was amazing. But I agree. I think when you take a look at from Force Awakens, The Last Jedi to Rise of Skywalker, there's two different visions there. And that's the problem. You know, you have what JJ had in mind for everything, and you have what Rian Johnson had in mind. And that's unfortunate, because they should have had somebody back there, you know, in the back. They didn't have to be somebody who wrote the entire story, but they should have been sitting there saying, you know what, Ryan, this is what JJ was going for. We like your ideas, but you have to make it fit into that. And that's what they needed to do. I think The Last Jedi would have been received a lot better had they have done that. And The Rise of Skywalker would have then been different. I do really I don't know if you read or saw the Colin Trevorrow script that was out there, the leaked script. Mm-hmm. That was by far superior to what we got with The Rise of Skywalker. And it just baffles me how anybody could have sat back and said, you know what, we don't want to do this. And then they see what J.J. Abrams did, and they're like, yeah, that's better. To me, it's just like, how is that better? Like, it's good. It's not bad. And it's a decent end to the trilogy. But to me, it didn't end the saga. Like, they had a nice end cap to the movie, which you could say, hey, that's a nice end to the saga. But honestly, there's so many questions still unanswered that fans want to know. And that was kind of big for the end of The Return of the Jedi. When that movie ended, everything was wrapped up with your heroes. You were just like, hey, you know, everything is good. I like where they're at this point. And then after 10 years, they then finally came out with books that took place after Return of the Jedi. You're like, heck yeah, more adventures? Excellent. At this point right here, you're like, I need more adventures because I need to know what's happening. Like, where's the universe? What's going to happen with the universe? You know, that kind of thing. And to me, it's just kind of annoying that they were like, this is the end of the Skywalker saga, when I think they could have continued it further. Like, they could have done more with it. Even with Mark Hamill out of it, and Carrie Fisher now gone, and Harrison Ford out of it, they still could have continued the Skywalker saga. To me, that would have been an easy transition, and keeping someone like Ben Solo alive and moving forward with him. Obviously it would be up to Adam Driver if he would want to continue doing it, but it seemed like he liked the character. I don't know, but I agree. There's just some things when it comes to the sequel trilogy that could have been done better. Maybe it was that they were rushing to get it out. I don't understand. And I get Dave Filoni, who, hey, Pittsburgh native. Dave Filoni has been very much admired in the Star Wars community. What he's done with the Clone Wars and Rebels, and now his involvement with the Mandalorian. And you sit back and you wonder, like, why didn't they bring him in, even as a consultant? He didn't have to be the producer running the entire saga or trilogy, but they should have brought him in because he is the closest thing to George Lucas they had. And when you read that Bob Iger book where you find out that they were planning on working with George Lucas and then things went bad and George Lucas was like, I'm done, I'm out then. That should have been their go-to. Like, well, Dave Filoni knows what is probably the closest to George Lucas we have. We should bring him over. And it's so confusing why they didn't go that route. It really is.
Well, they put faith in a guy named Pablo Hidalgo and that Lucas story group. Yeah. To be like the people who were like, okay, this is how it should go. And they were just rubber stamping. Like, and don't get me wrong, like, I love the story that Rian Johnson told in The Last Jedi. Like, I'm one of those few people who, like, I highly anticipate his trilogy. I hope he gets to make that. And because I liked his ideas of how the Force worked and everything else. So, like, it intrigues me, like, what he would bring to the table with a trilogy based upon his vision of how the Star Wars universe is. But it was like, you're right. Like, somebody should have said to him, like, okay, this is phenomenal and we want to explore this, but this isn't the story we're trying to tell right now.
Yeah.
This is what we need from this story. This is, that there should have been a Bible. Like, you're right. Like, a guy like Dave Filoni should have been involved with this, saying, this is the general story we want to tell. You've got to, JJ took us from A to B. You've got to take us from C to D. And this is what we need from you. And instead, they kind of let him do what he wanted to do, which for the most part was a great movie, which had a very interesting take on how the Force works and the character of Rey and the character of Kylo Ren and everything that was involved with that. But at the end, it's this square peg between, it's trying to be fit into a round hole between two other movies that are trying to work together with each other and kind of avoid that middle one.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, and I'm such a big fan of the movies, and I love being involved with the fandom of Star Wars, and it's become so toxic because of this sequel trilogy, and it's so unfortunate because being a fan of Star Wars, I remember the days when it was frowned upon, when people would look at you. I was in middle school and high school during the prequels, and people would look at you and say, "You're a fan of Star Wars? What a dork," Right. And I was like, "Aw, but I like it," It jump up, almost 20 years now, or 20 years, and it is now something that people love. Like, everybody enjoys Star Wars, but the fandom, the ones that are like diehard fans who have been fans for so long, they're the ones that appear to be making it so toxic because it's not what they wanted. It's not what their expectations weren't met. And to me, that's just annoying. It's just like, come on, guys. Like, the sequel trilogy wasn't the best. I'm not saying it's horrible. There's issues with it, but there were issues with the original trilogy. There were issues with the prequel trilogy. It's nothing can be perfect, and nothing's ever going to meet your standards. If you create these ideas in your head, those are never going to be met, except I did call the Rey Palpatine thing a couple years ago, but they aren't going to be met. And it's unfortunate, that fans get like that. And for me, that's the whole idea behind my podcast here is to bring some levity to the fandom, to really just talk to people and say, hey, look, we're all fans. You know, let's just enjoy this. Stop making all these excuses or causing an uproar in this. And yeah, we may have disagreements. Like I'm not as big of a fan of The Last Jedi as you, but I totally respect your enjoyment of it, because there are parts of it that are really enjoyable. And honestly, there are probably parts of that movie that are more Star Wars than Star Wars has ever been.
Right.
That's what's so amazing about it. And I too, I'm excited for Rian Johnson's trilogy. I'd like to see it, see what he can do in a different time era and everything like that. But you know, we got to get these fans back on board, and I think that's a big reason why Lucasfilm has decided to move in and create their new era of sorts with the High Republic. You know, taking place 200 years before the Skywalker saga. It's a time period that's never really been hit, and I think that's the whole reason why they're jumping over there, because they're like, hey, there's no expectations. You know, nobody knows what happened here because nobody's ever written about it or done anything about it. So let's jump in there, and there's no expectations, and we can move forward. Do you have any thoughts on what they're doing with that?
I'm not surprised by that move. I mean, it's, you know, one of the things that the fans have always clamored for is something that involves like the Knights of the Old Republic, that Xbox video game from 20 years ago, going in that direction. So like while they're not going that far back, you know, they are going far enough back to kind of get clear of everything. Like, you know, the only character that should be around would be Yoda.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, you could have like Yoda as kind of like your character that you start with, and you know, like, okay, hey, yeah, we know that guy, okay, great, and build around that, and it makes sense from that standpoint. Like I get the method to the madness there, but you know, you talked about like the toxicity of the fan base, and it's like funny. It's like, you know, you had a really good movie that the fan base kind of, you know, crapped all over, and that was Solo. You know, you it suffered because of the backlash of The Last Jedi, which is like this, you know. And the funny thing is, I see people now who are now like catching it for whatever reason, like maybe it's on Disney Plus or they're catching on, you know, they're borrowing a Blu-ray or something. They're like, you know, it wasn't that bad of a movie. And no, it wasn't. It was actually really good. It was a fun movie. I enjoyed the heck out of it. It was a movie I didn't want, but man, you know, Ron Howard made chicken salad out of chicken scratch and made it work. And, you know, but you missed out on it because you were so pissed off about The Last Jedi. And now you screwed us because Lucasfilm is like, well, we're going to take a step away. We're going to stop doing these side movies. We're going to kind of reestablish what we want to do. And so we're going back to like maybe a 2 or 3 year period where we're not going to have a Star Wars movie. And it's all their fault. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. Man, Solo was a good movie. I really enjoyed Solo. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the best Star Wars movie, but it was really, really enjoyable. And the way they left it really wants you to see more. Donald Glover was fantastic as Lando in that. Like,
oh, yeah.
That one moment where I think he says, "What have we here?" Or "Hello," or something like that when they first meet. Like, it sounded like Billy D. Williams. I was just taken aback by it. I was like, holy crap, Donald Glover really dove into that role and did well. And Alden Ehrenreich wasn't bad as Han. And the thing I liked about him as Han was, while he stayed true to what Harrison Ford brought, he also made it his own character and kind of just brought a little bit of his own style to it. And I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a cool idea to move in that direction with it. And it was a good movie. And I wish people would have seen it. I wish we could have gotten a Solo 2, because there were talks for a while prior to the movie coming out that could have been a trilogy of sorts for his whole character arc and where we were going with that. And the big reveal at the end, you know, with Darth Maul. It's like, like, give me more. Because who didn't want to see more Darth Maul in movies? And I think that's what they were doing. That's what they were trying to do. Like, look, we'll give you guys more Darth Maul. You guys love Darth Maul. He was, shortchanged in the Phantom Menace. Yeah, he was in Clone Wars and Rebels. But if you want more live action, hey, he's going to show up here. And fans just missed out. They just missed out because they were just so upset about what happened with The Last Jedi. And it's unfortunate. It really is.
And I was a guy, like, I will wholeheartedly admit, I went into that movie with very low expectations because I knew what was happening behind the scenes with the original directors and Ron Howard coming in to make the save. And also, it was like, this isn't the movie I want. Like, I don't want us to explore the backstory of Han Solo. I like knowing as much as I know, and that's all I need. I was a guy who was like, why aren't we getting Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi? Where's this movie at? Like, this should be what we're doing.
Why is it taking so long? It's like, I don't understand. That should have been like episode 7 and Kenobi. Like that's how it should have went. But that's me.
That was like, Rogue One makes sense. Like, okay, that's a cool idea. I get that. That works for me. I'm perfectly fine with that. But you got to give me a Kenobi movie. Like, this is like, out of all the stuff that happened in the prequels, the shining star was Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi. Give me more of that. You can make this work. There are 101 ways you can make this work, and I would love to see. And you can include Vader, like Vader's hunting him down, and it would be like just phenomenal. And like, instead you gave me Solo, and I was like, come on, yeah. I don't want it. But when I saw it, you're right. I was like, wow, they really made this work. And you're right, Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian was just like knocking it out of the park. I was like, holy hell. But it's one of those things where I get why people didn't go see it because they were so mad about The Last Jedi, but at the same time, man, you missed out and you screwed it for everybody. So thanks a lot.
And that's the thing. I mean, you take a look and people were saying, oh, it's oversaturation of Star Wars. And within the span of, 3 years, we had 4 movies that came out. And to me, that's 4 movies within one galaxy, and not all of them are connected. And people were complaining, oh, it's oversaturation. But then you take a look at what Marvel has done and what DC was trying to do, and pushing out these films that are just all connected, just here. You were having 4 a year. So people were just trying to make excuses, and I'm not saying fans, I'm saying Disney. Bob Iger was oversaturation. No, that's not it at all. You guys got afraid. You were afraid of what the fans were saying, and you didn't like the toxicity surrounding your property that you spent $4 billion on. So you decided to change your plans, and now we're screwed because we have to wait. I mean, we're not getting another Star Wars movie now. At the earliest, it's going to be 2022, and with what's going on now in the world, that could be pushed back even further.
Right.
That's so unfortunate because we could have had something coming out this year or next year, and it's just, who knows? I mean, we don't know where it's going to lead because they technically don't have a solid announcement for a movie. They're just like, hey, Untitled Star Wars movie in 2023. And you're just like, hey, that's cool. Oh, one every other year at that point. Okay, that's cool. But what is it? We don't know anything about it. And the only new stuff that we know is coming is Kenobi, Mandalorian season 2, and a potential for a sequel series from Rebels.
Right.
The High Republic, which is all literature. That's comic books and novels. Like, besides that, we really have nothing to get overly excited about. And don't get me wrong, I'm excited about the Kenobi series because I've wanted that just as bad as you or anybody else.
Right.
Mandalorian season 1 was phenomenal, and I'm looking forward to season 2, especially with the idea and the fact that they're possibly bringing Ahsoka into the live action universe, and as well as other characters from animated and other films. That's exciting. But we need more. I think that's Star Wars has always been such a big film. Like that was the summer blockbuster. Like that was the big blockbuster in the early 2000s. That's what it was. It was the prequels. You're talking about the prequels. Hey, what's coming out this summer? Star Wars. You're like, oh yeah, that kicked off the summer movie, fandom or whatever you want to call it. The whole summer movie year was Star Wars. It would come out in May, and that would start everything. Now, we have the Marvel movies and some DC films and other things like that. But for the most part, I mean, I'm not saying I'm sick of Marvel movies, but they've gotten to the point where it's just like, it's another Marvel movie. All right. Star Wars was always an event. And I liked how they moved it to Christmas. for that because it was kind of neat, make it a family tradition, every Christmas, every other Christmas to go with your family and go see Star Wars. But I just miss the whole aspect of this big film event and it being Star Wars. I miss that. And it's weird to say because Rise of Skywalker just came out, 6 months, not even 6 months ago, but there's nothing to look forward to. And that's what I miss is just having this countdown, on my phone that I can look at, 432 days until the next Star Wars movie. I don't have that, and it's just unfortunate. Now, for you, what would you say is like your most memorable Star Wars moment in your life? Like, is there something that has stuck out to you that you just go back to and like, man, Star Wars means so much to me, but this moment here, this was the moment for me in Star Wars.
Well, I mean, like, short of the being dragged out of the theater after Empire by my father, when I went to go see The Phantom Menace for the first time, I'll tell two stories about this. For people who don't know me, like I'm 6'4". I played high school football. I've always been a big guy. So like in 1999, I was 275 pounds and pretty much all muscle. So me and my buddy Thad, we went to South Hills Village to go see Star Wars because it was the only theater in the area at the time that was the stadium style seating. Like all of them are that way now, but back then that was one of the only ones in the area. And also they had the THX surround sound in the theater and everything else. So this is what we were like, we want to see it. We want to see it in this fashion. So the night before it opens, we go to get the tickets and, I'm going up and, I'm wearing a Star Wars t-shirt, leather jacket, and I was still rocking an 80s style mullet. And I'm walking up and this guy goes, "You going to buy Star Wars tickets?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And you're like, "Well, they're already all sold out for the midnight showing." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And this little nerdy guy sitting on like this Jar Jar Binks beanbag or something, he's like, "Well, my friend, you should have been here much earlier to get your tickets." And I'm like, I just looked at him like, I will break you in half and take your tickets. And he whips out a lightsaber on me like he's going to defend himself. And I'm just like, you're not even worth it. Good Lord. But the true memory is like when I went to go see The Phantom Menace for the first time. And this is, the thing to remember is 20th Century Fox still owned the distribution rights.
Yeah.
So, you're sitting in your seat and that 20th Century Fox fanfare kicks off, and in my head, that's still a part of Star Wars. Like as a kid, I thought that was a part of Star Wars. I thought like, when I saw that opening other movies, I'm like, well, what? It's Star Wars. That's what opened Star Wars. What's going on? So like you get that fanfare, then you get the Lucasfilm logo. And then you get the, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And I'd read that and then I'd close my eyes. And then the trumpets hit. There's for the Star Wars theme. And I'd open my eyes and, Star Wars would be on the screen pulling away. And tears were rolling down my face because it was like, I'm here. This is something new. It hit me in that moment as I closed my eyes, just waiting to hear those trumpets that, finally it's back. And that was like one of those things like and I do it to this day. Like every Star Wars movie I've gone to see as part of the Skywalker saga and has that. When I read a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I just close my eyes and wait for the trumpets. And every time I tear up as I open them and see the Star Wars logo pulling away on the screen.
Yeah. Oh, I get giddy too when that happens. Like there's just like butterflies on my stomach, and I get a big smile on my face, and I absolutely love it. I'm with you on that. It's such an amazing experience, and just to be able to harken back to being a child, witnessing that for the first time, and growing up with these characters and being able to continuously experiencing this story, this saga, even 20, 30 years, 40 years later for some people. It's an amazing thing. And it's something to not just bat your eye at. There's so many people, like my girlfriend, for instance, she refuses to watch Star Wars. I just don't understand it. It's like, it's a cultural phenomenon. Like, you should at least give it a shot. Check it out, see what it's like, and see what all the craze is. Because granted, you may not enjoy it as much as I do or as other people, but it's one of those things, like, you should be able to sit there and say, you know what, I gave it a shot. I've seen it. I do that with musical artists. There's some artists that I want to go see in concert, like Ozzy. I saw him in 2005. Am I a huge Ozzy fan? Not really, but I can sit there and say, you know what, I saw him in concert.
Yeah.
Something like that when it comes to Star Wars, I just feel like people need to realize and understand it. It is a phenomenon, and it's crazy what has built over 40 years with that and what George Lucas created. And it's hard to believe, and I'm sure he still to this day doesn't believe how big it has gotten. And it's amazing. Yeah, it really is. That's pretty much all I can say when it comes to something like that.
It is that thing. Like, people will ask me, how can you they look at the Rise of Skywalker, and it wasn't that well reviewed of a movie, or even the Phantom Menace or Clone Wars or Revenge of the Sith, the prequels as a whole. How can you enjoy those? What? They're bad movies. I'm like, you're right, they are. But the 7-year-old in me that still exists wants to enjoy them, and can still enjoy them. I can let it go. I can be that 7-year-old again and just enjoy it for what it is. Yeah. The 40-something in me is always going to be like, man, the Phantom Menace is a bad movie. And most of the times I'll skip over that one. But, clones and Sith, I can still enjoy and watch them as that giddy 7-year-old who just wants to be entertained. And it's fantasy and it's science fiction and it's everything that, you want from a movie that just completely entertain you and just get swept away in it. And that's the thing. I think most people watch movies nowadays and they don't just let themselves go. In that theater, and when you're in that theater, in that darkened theater, and when the opening scroll starts going up, I'm no longer there. I'm no longer in that seat. My body maybe, but mentally, my spirit is there, and I just let myself go and enjoy the moment for what it is.
I'm the same way, and I think it's you, Sean. On your show, you've talked about your emotion when it comes to films, and you allow your emotions to build up on and come out while you're watching movies. And I'm the same way. I'm one of those people that I'll sit there and I'll watch a movie, and I'll take The Rise of Skywalker, for instance, and that moment when Chewie finds out that Leia died, it destroys me. It crushes me. And it's the performance, it's the music, but most of all, it's I understand what Chewie's going through in that moment because I've grown up with him for 30 years. I've sat there for 30 years, 20 years, 30 years with him and realizing he is best friends with these people, and he has just lost everyone. He lost Han, he's lost Luke, and now he's lost Leia, and it just tears me up. And then even at the end of The Rise of Skywalker, I got choked up. And while I still don't agree that it's the best way to end the saga, my mind knew this is it. They've been talking, this is the end of the Skywalker saga. And the moment that you see the Millennium Falcon flying, over the sands of Tatooine, and then Rey landing at Lars Homestead, and I sat there and I started getting choked up, and I'm sitting there why am I getting so choked up? This isn't an emotional scene, but it really is. This is the end of everything that I've watched, what I've been so excited about since 1995. This is the end. And to me, it was so emotional, and it's because I allow myself to just be taken away. I'm not worrying about what's going on around me, what's going on in the world, what's going on in my life. I just get into the film and enjoy it and just let it take me on that journey. And for me, that's the best part of any movie, but especially movies that I love, like the Star Wars saga.
And I think it's funny, there's a moment that they completely blew and spoiled in The Last Skywalker that if they hadn't done that, would have absolutely had me bawling in the movie theater. And that's the moment where Poe is like, they're not coming. Lando couldn't get anybody together. Well, this is it. We're all going to die here. So let's give it our best shot. And it was like that moment from Infinity War or Endgame where, Cap is beat and, the shield's broken and he's standing up and he tightens up the strap and he's just going to take on Thanos and the entire army himself. And he hears in the comm, Cap on your left. And, that's when the portals open up. And like in the theater, I lost it. I just completely lost it at that moment because it was like this amazing moment. And I could big tears are rolling down my face as like the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe showed up.
With you on.
Yeah. And it was like that. But if they would have done the same thing in Star Wars, if they hadn't blown that moment in the trailer by showing that fleet with the Falcon, as great as that moment is, and like you're like, look, it's the Falcon, but if they hadn't blown that would have been their on their left moment, and it would have absolutely like just been like this amazing like tears rolling down my face moment, and they completely blew that, and I can't believe they did that. It was so shocking to me that JJ let that out of the box.
JJ, here's the thing, quickly talking about JJ, the difference between JJ and Rian Johnson here. It's crazy to think JJ, who's someone that's so much about secrecy when it comes to his stories and his movies, how there was so much more information that came out during The Force Awakens, prior to The Force Awakens and prior to The Rise of Skywalker about his movies as opposed to Rian Johnson. When Rian Johnson's movie was about to come out, everybody, there's not a single person who thought that movie was going to go the way that it did. But when you take a look at The Force Awakens and The Rise of Skywalker, it was kind of like there was so much information out there. We knew so much of what was going to happen, what was going on. The Rise of Skywalker movie leaked. The entire script leaked. I want to say it was like 2 or 3 weeks before it even came out, which was completely shocking, especially when it comes to a J.J. Abrams film. And I think you're right. I think it's because of the way that not only leaks were coming out for that movie, but just the marketing wasn't done very well for it. And trailers, it's a complaint that I have all the time is don't show the whole movie in a trailer. I want to see the movie, absolutely, and I want to get excited about the movie, but don't show big moments like that. And Star Wars is one of those franchises that you can show minimal amount of screen or shots from the movie in a trailer and people are going to get excited. You take a look at what George Lucas did with the prequels. Probably the only moment that I disagree with him showing in any trailer with the prequels was Darth Maul. The Duel of the Fates, because he does in one of the trailers you see the moment when he, the double-bladed lightsaber.
Right.
But besides that, his trailers were very uniform, but they never gave away too much of the movie. So you could go in there and still be surprised at things that happen. And this era of Star Wars just wasn't able to do that. But again, George Lucas is a marketing mastermind. You take a look at what he's done his whole career. I mean, it was about selling toys for him. That's where he made all his money, is selling, his toys. And it's because of his smarts when it comes to marketing. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about, I don't know if you've watched it. Have you been catching up on the Clone Wars? Are you watching what's going on right now with it?
Actually, with the final season, I've been waiting for it to just run its course. I'm just going to binge the whole thing. But I did watch the first 3 episodes with the Echo.
Bad Batch arc?
Yeah.
Okay. Dude, you're in for a treat, let me tell you. Because, the final 4 episodes just started this past week, and it's the Siege of Mandalore. And
that's what I've been waiting for. Like, that's the moment. That, it's one of those, like, it kind of got talked. If you read the Ahsoka novel, I mean, it gets mentioned a little bit in there, but like, it's one of those things, like, that character of Ahsoka became like a character I went from hating to one of my all-time favorite characters in Star Wars history.
I'm with you on that. I'm 100% with you on that.
I'll never forget, me and my girlfriend Nancy, we went to go see the Clone Wars cartoon in a theater. And I remember us walking on and her going, I really like that Ahsoka character. That Snips. She's kind of cool. I like her a lot. And I'm like, yeah, it's too bad she has to die. And she's like, what? I'm like, Order 66. She's going to go down. If she doesn't go down in Order 66, she has to go down at some point before then. This character has to die. She can't. You didn't hear anything about her after Star Wars, after Return. She wasn't in Return of the Jedi. She wasn't around for any of that. She has to die in Order 66. And Nancy's like, no, you're so wrong. I'm like, no, I'm not. Think about it. Well, clearly she doesn't, and I'm glad she doesn't. And like that, her character, like it's like one of those characters that Dave Filoni, Pittsburgh native, just like really created a character that was like went from being like this annoying schoolgirl to being one of the most important characters in Star Wars lore. And like the moment in Rebels where she faces Vader is one of the most emotional roller coasters I've ever been on in my life. I'm
with you. And you, I mean, I don't know how much you're on social media. I mean, I created a little meme and put it together because you do see Ahsoka and Anakin's last time together prior to the meeting in Rebels. And it hit me. Like, I'm sitting there watching it and the way they talk. And I sat there and I was like, holy crap, that's it. That their story's done. You know, like as Anakin and Ahsoka, like they're done at this moment. And that was a little bit of an emotional moment for me because you know what's going to happen. You know what comes in Rebels between the two of them. You know what happens to Anakin. And you would think, knowing Anakin's journey and how Luke is the reason that he is able to turn from the dark. But, you know, another person that could have done that was Ahsoka. He was so close to Ahsoka. And you think of that moment in Rebels and you're like, how can he not? Like that moment for me is the moment you're like, Anakin is truly gone. Like he is gone. Like the one person at that point in time, the one person that probably could have pulled him back was Ahsoka, but not even she could do it. And it's an absolute heartbreaking scene in Rebels and just in the Clone Wars. And I know this arc is just getting started and I know there's no more interactions between them, but I don't know if I'm ready to see Order 66 from another angle. Like that to me, I'm just like, I don't know if I can do it because what's Ahsoka's mindset? You know, what is she going through at that time? Because she's now going to be losing everybody that she loved. And she has to go into hiding prior to her showing up in Rebels. And I really want to see it. I can't wait to see it, but I don't know if I'm ready to see it because it's the end of the Clone Wars, which was a fantastic series. It was amazing. It started off slow. That Clone Wars movie was horrendous. It started off slow, but it really picked up and it picked up big time. And it is a beloved series, and Dave Filoni did an amazing job in pushing that as a showrunner and moving forward and a writer and director on it. And I just don't want to see it end. I don't.
It's one of the amazing things that, you know, one of the major complaints about the prequel trilogies is the character of Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how when you look at the character of Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars cartoon, how much more you appreciate that character as compared to the movie version.
Yeah, I mean,
I get like in a movie you can't explore the character as deeply as you could in this series, but it's like the character is so much more interesting. And like if that was what the character that George Lucas had in mind, like why didn't we get that on the screen as well? Because it seemed like the ball was really dropped there.
Mm-hmm.
And like because the character is very interesting and compelling in that cartoon. And
I think the problem with that, and I kind of go back a little bit to the prequels, and you know, I understand what George Lucas was trying to do. First and foremost, he was trying to pull in a new generation of fans. Right. So he was trying to get those 12, 13-year-olds and younger to get into this new trilogy he was making with the Phantom Menace. And he brought Anakin in to – I think that's the problem. Had Anakin been a teenager in episode 1, you could have developed his character and his relationship with Obi-Wan so much more. And that's not a knock on what George Lucas did. I completely understand why he did what he did. And I appreciate the prequels. I enjoy them. Revenge of the Sith is one of my favorite, Star Wars movies. But it was a missed opportunity. It absolutely was, because Hayden Christensen, I don't know why he gets such a bad rap for his portrayal. To me, he was doing what George Lucas wanted. I mean, you take a look at Hayden Christensen in other movies, he's a decent actor. He's not a bad actor, So when you take a look at his performance on Star Wars, obviously that was a decision made between him and the director and the creator of like, okay, this is how Anakin needs to be portrayed. He does a hell of a job. And I do wish we would have gotten more backstory on him and understanding everything. But the whole overarching story of his fall was about his inability to let go of things that he loves. And while the Clone Wars does a good job in exploring his relationship with Obi-Wan Kenobi, him losing Kenobi as a friend, as a mentor, wasn't what drove him to becoming Darth Vader, where losing Padme and his mother, that was what drove him to it. And the way that he felt slighted by the Jedi. So I appreciate what Clone Wars has done to build his character up. And again, I think more so it expands on his ability as a Jedi, his relationship with Obi-Wan, but the relationship and the fall of Anakin does take place in the films. And I like it that way. Because if you would have gone too deep into it with the movies, like even if they would have had, and I know at the time when the prequels were being made, Ahsoka wasn't even a thought, but if you would have had something like that in there, I think that would have kind of tarnished a little bit of his relationship with Padme. And that's kind of what is so built up over the trilogy of the prequels, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, I get that. But there's like that great moment when Ahsoka's walking away from the Jedi Order. Yeah. And Anakin's still trying to convince her not to. He's like, you have no idea. I want to walk away every day. I have my reasons. And she knows what's going on, because Obi-Wan knows what's going on.
Yeah.
It's like the worst kept secret. Like he thinks he's keeping it a secret, but everybody around them probably knows what's actually happening. Yeah. And they just kind of ignore it. Like, okay, yeah, we know you and her are together, but we're just gonna ignore it and pretend it's not happening. But like that moment where he's trying to convince her to stay, like it tells me that relationship was so important to him. So that moment where on the hangar deck where they're saying goodbye to each other for the last time, yeah, that's emotional, because the next time she sees him, he's not Anakin anymore. He's Vader, and
yeah.
And she almost saves him, because there's that moment when she cuts the helmet and he's Anakin for just a second, and then Vader takes control again.
Yes.
Where he says it as Anakin, not Vader, Ahsoka, and his eye looks softer, and then all of a sudden Vader just kicks back in, and he's like, damn it.
Yeah, I know. It's such a great scene. It's so emotional, and that's why you need to get to the Siege of Mandalore, honestly. And I Clone Wars, while the series is excellent, to me, it has so much filler. There's so much filler in that series, and the first 8 episodes to me are filler. Like the Bad Batch stuff was cool, but it didn't really go anywhere. Just kind of like, hey, this is what it is. Here's some Anakin and Obi-Wan shenanigans. Then there's a few episodes after that is all Ahsoka, essentially. It's all about her and what she's been doing since she walked away from the Jedi Order. And it's boring, I want to say, in a way. Like there's some exciting moments, but we all know that it was leading to the Siege of Mandalore. And it's kind of like, just get us there. And then we get there, and that episode is so amazing. Like I did an interview a couple weeks back with Kevin Kiner, who is the composer for the Clone Wars.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, and his excitement and passion for Star Wars was so large in that interview. And in the interview he talked about this final season of Clone Wars and how great it was to be able to have this opportunity. you then watch that first episode of the Siege of Mandalore arc, and you can tell the passion in the music. The music is so theatrical, and even the animation is up to 11. Like, it is just fantastic. There are moments in there where they actually are just, you feel like you're watching a film. Like, you just are. Like, you're sitting there like, man, this should have been in the theater. Like, this scene is so large. Why is it not in a theater? And musically, is done fantastic. And there's actually a moment, and again, it's something that you may have seen on social media, but they actually pay respect to Rey. There's a little bit of Rey's theme in this episode with Ahsoka, and it's actually brilliant because the moment it happens and where it plays, it's beautiful. And Kevin Conner did an amazing job, and that's just a little part of the beauty of this show. And I just wish they would have done this Siege of Mandalore, just been the entire 12 episodes of this season.
Yeah,
it would have been
exactly.
amazing. Yeah. But definitely, I don't know, man. I mean, we've hit an hour here. I appreciate you coming on here. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss Star Wars and your love for Star Wars and everything?
I could discuss Star Wars all day. You know, it's like I said. I mean, it's home base for me. Like, I always feel like on our show, the Pittsburgh Nerd Podcast, we talk about it too much. But then I think about it, and I think like, no, because that's home. That's for me and Ian. That's where we come home to. And you try not to drive something into the ground, but sometimes it's like you just can't help yourself because your love of something runs so deep. And my love of Star Wars runs all the way to my soul. Probably more than anything else. That's home base for me. And so, yeah, like I could talk Star Wars all day. I could talk about the future, the past, and everything that it means to me. And it's given me my fandom. It's given me. It's opened doors to other things that I can love and appreciate, and it's that one thing that is always going to be a constant in my life. Like my girlfriend, she works with somebody I went to high school with, and she said, "Hey, yeah, I'm Sean Koon's girlfriend," and she's like, "Oh yeah, he was really into Star Wars." And she's like, "Yeah, he still is," So it's been that, so it's been a constant in my life since I was 5 years old, and.
Yeah,
and I'm thankful for it because it's something I can appreciate and can always enjoy and go back and just smile. Like if I need to put a smile on my face, I'll put in Empire, or I'll put in A New Hope, or even
Empire's a weird choice if you want to smile, but that's all right.
But I love. I mean, that's my favorite Star Wars movie at this point. As a 47-year-old, like I appreciate it more. 7-year-old Sean, 40 years ago, that 7-year-old walked out of the theater confused by what he saw because the good guys always win. As a 47-year-old now, 40 years later, I can look back at that film and I can appreciate what it is. It's a masterpiece of a movie that tells a compelling story, and it does make me smile because even though at the end of it, everything's going to hell in a handbasket, it's beautifully done.
It really is. It is a great film, and I appreciate everything coming on here talking with me. And I tell you this, you don't talk too much Star Wars. Actually, I think you could talk a little more Star Wars on your show, but that's me. But that's how Colton and I were with Bridging the Geekdoms. We were just talking about Star Wars almost every single week, and it was just like that's not what the point of that podcast was. So we kind of branched off, and we made a separate podcast specifically for Star Wars to talk Star Wars because we both love it so much. And that's kind of what we did. I'm not saying that's what you have to do. I mean, I know time's limited, but it's one of those things that I'm the same way. I can talk Star Wars all the time with anybody, but we don't want the podcast or the episode going too long. Otherwise, we can sit here. But maybe you can jump on some other time and maybe bring Ian along with you next time. We can definitely talk more Star Wars and everything like that. Now, where can people find Pittsburgh Nerd Podcast? Do you guys have a website or anything like that, or is it just on podcast apps?
We're just on most podcast apps. We're pretty easy to find. Just search Pittsburgh Nerd. We're on Twitter and Facebook. I'm more active on the Twitter account than I am with the Facebook, but just search Pittsburgh Nerd. You'll see our goofy little logo, and we're very easy to find. But yeah, it's most podcast places you can find us and check us out. Right now, because of the pandemic, I am doing it with my girlfriend Nancy, just because of social distancing, and Ian works in the medical field. He's so we don't want to get him exposed to anything, and so we just decided, like, during this time, I'm just going to do the show with Nancy. So it's a little different than what it normally is, but there's plenty of stuff on there to listen to with me and Ian. Nancy's a great co-host as well, so check us out, and I think you'll appreciate what we're trying to do.
Excellent, man. Thank you again so much. I enjoyed talking with you on Star Wars and our love. I mean, it's you can see the love in the way you talk, not just for Star Wars, but in podcasting, and that's something that's great when it comes to podcasting. That's what people see, and that's what gets people to listen. So thanks for stopping by, and I definitely want to do it again sometime.
It's certainly my pleasure. I'm happy to jump on anytime and talk Star Wars or anything else you want to chat about. I'm pretty open to darn near anything.
Perfect. Everybody just check out Pittsburgh Nerd Podcast on a podcast app near you. Take it easy, everyone. And there it is, guys. There it is. That's this week's episode of Shootin the Sith. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to reach Pittsburgh Nerd, just find them on Twitter. Just search Pittsburgh Nerd on Twitter. You'll find them. They're great guys to talk to, the entire lot of them. They're a lot of fun to listen to as well. If you want to learn some interesting things about Pittsburgh, or you want to hear what's going on, Pittsburgh is such an interesting town. I grew up there, and it doesn't get enough love that I think it should get in the world. And the Pittsburgh Nerd, they show their love for Pittsburgh with a pop culture twist and nerdy twist to it, because they talk about films and entertainment and everything like that, and it's so interesting how they kind of bridge everything together there. It's really cool. I do encourage you all to find their podcast, check it out. I always say, and they say the same thing, give them 3 episodes. Do the 3-episode challenge. Listen to 3 episodes. If you enjoy it, excellent. Keep listening. If you don't, we can't blame you if you step away. But I think you guys will enjoy Pittsburgh Nerd just as you enjoy my shows, whether it's Shootin the Sith or Bridging the Geekdoms, or maybe it's Colton's show, Polygon Warriors. All these shows, with the exception of Pittsburgh Nerd, they're off on their own, but my show's Colton's show, you can find over at Spoilerverse.com. Spoilerverse.com is where you're going to find all the amazing content that Colton, myself, and the guys over at Spoiler Country put out. There are, I think, 13 podcasts on the network now. 13. That's hundreds and hundreds of hours of content that you can listen to right at your fingertips, right there. All you need to do is go over to spoilercountry.com, or not Spoiler Country, Spoilerverse.com. Sorry, I misspoke there. Spoilerverse.com. You go there, and you will find all of the shows, as well as articles, as well as things like the K-Files from Sarah Kay. She does an amazing job just kind of looking into the weird, the strange, and the paranormal. Take a look at that, and it's true. Like, she does a lot of research and puts out these articles. They're fantastic. You'll have awesome articles by Jay Roach at Roach's Den. His writing is hilarious sometimes, but he really puts it out there. I mean, he's honest, he's upfront, and he just tells it how it is. It's a breath of fresh air when you think about it, because a lot of times now, these websites that you go to, it's all filler, it's all fluff, it's all about, how can we make ourselves look good? How can we make what we're talking about look good? Or how can we make it look bad as possible? That's not what Jay's about. Jay is just truthful and honest, and that's what I love about his writing. You also have Spoiler Country, which they sit down and talk with some of the most ambitious minds and creative minds within the entertainment industry, whether it's comics, movies, television, music. You're going to be able to go there to Spoiler Country, that podcast, and listen to so many interviews with so many great, great people in the industry. I recently was on an episode where we got to interview Kevin Kiner. He is the composer of Star Wars The Clone Wars, of Star Wars Rebels, of Titans, of Doom Patrol, of so many other things. It was an excellent episode to be a part of. So go find that over on Spoiler Country. Listen to it. He loves Star Wars, talks a lot about Star Wars. That's right up everybody's alley here for sure. There's also an awesome interview on Spoiler Country with Emily Swallow, who played the armorer in the first season of The Mandalorian. So go check that out as well. But again, you'll find all of that at Spoilerverse.com. With all that said, that was a long talk there. With all that said, thank you for joining me this week. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'll talk at all of you next week. May the Force be with you.